Recently, we saw the long-awaited release of Disney's live-action remake of Snow White. My god, it has been a voyage to get to this point, hasn't it? When this one was first announced way back when, I think a lot of people were already set against it on principle. We all know the long history of people being salty that the Disney live-action remakes exist at all. That's been an ongoing discussion for a decade at least, and really picked up steam once they started hitting some of the Renaissance-era films. On top of that, this movie has been a magnet for controversies. There was an outcry in regards to colourblind casting for Snow White. There was an outcry in regards to the Seven Dwarfs. Some people thought they were offensive, others thought that if Disney listened to the critiques, they're depriving little people actors of work. But wait, there's more! There was also all the stuff with Rachel Zegler's comments and critiques on the original film, which made people go insane. Plus, there's the Israel-Palestine split in regards to Zegler and Godot. All in all, if I was a Disney executive before the release of this movie, I'd be looking at all of these controversies as well as the enormous budget the film had, coming in between $240 million and $270 million, meaning it needs to gross around $500 million in order to be safe. Usually I think it's double the budget to cover all the advertising and other hidden costs. And by the way, this makes it one of the most expensive films ever made, so if I was an executive, I'd be looking at this and thinking, oh shit. And I have to say, they'd be right to think that way, because it doesn't seem to be doing all that well. Already the industry's calling it a box office bomb, and I can't blame them. Internationally on its first weekend, it grossed $86 million. I think they were looking to be deep into the 100 millions by this point. They wanted that big splash, but it hasn't happened. I think you could argue on and on about the reasons for this, but in the end it doesn't matter. It's on track to be a flop unless it somehow proves to have weirdly strong legs over the coming weeks. In the end though, financial success, it doesn't really mean much. Good films have flopped, bad films have done well. In the end, what matters most is whether a film is genuinely fun to watch. Good. So, of course, just for a baseline understanding before I give my own personal thoughts, it's over to Rotten Tomatoes. In terms of critical score, it's not doing very well at all, with a rotten 42% approval rating off of 210 reviews. Audiences seem to find it a bit more favourable, with the film sitting at 74% approval, but it's clear that this is not what they were hoping for at all. They would have wanted far more than this, and we all know it. They clearly wanted critical and commercial acclaim to silence the haters and the doubters, and it just wasn't to be. Also, I wanted to give a dishonourable mention to the reviewer synopsis on Rotten Tomatoes. Here we go. Snow White is hardly a grumpy time at the movies, thanks to Rachel Zegler's luminous star turn, but it's bashful treatment of the source material, along with some dopey stylistic choices, won't make everyone happy. Was that an AI-generated synopsis? Did somebody get paid to write that trash? Was it lifted from review? Kill it with fire. That's the reviewers, that's the audience. What about my thoughts? Well, I suppose we'd better start breaking down the movie. All in all, I actually didn't mind it. I feel like people online are acting like this movie is the worst of the remakes ever put to screen, and that it's an utter bastardization of the greatest film of all time. For starters, are we still pretending that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is all that good? Don't get me wrong, it's a classic and I enjoy it. That being said though, it's a product of its time, and there isn't much there. It was a fun spectacle at the time, and now it oozes nostalgia and has an aura about it, because films in that vein are simply not made anymore. Is this new one a top tier film? No. Is it coming close to the best adaptations? No. Is it one of the worst? No. It is not bottom rung at all. For me, it is leagues and leagues ahead of the likes of Pinocchio and Peter Pan and Wendy. There is a lot to like. I mean, there's a lot to dislike too, but a lot to like. But let's get cracking, shall we? We'll start with the score, the songs, the music. They included a few updated versions of a couple of the classics from the original. Hi-Ho, Whistle While You Work, the Silly Song. They even had an orchestral version of Someday My Prince Will Come. At the very least, I'm extremely glad they included Hi-Ho and Whistle While You Work, because for me, they are by far the best songs in the original. They were bangers then, they remain bangers to this day, even in these new versions. Plus, there's a bunch of new songs that have been added, and they all work very well. The marquee song is clearly Waiting on a Wish, which is indeed a very good song, but my personal favourite was at the start of the movie. Good Things Grow. Plus, there's a villain song for the Evil Queen. I wasn't expecting to like it much at all, to be honest, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by it. And so I suppose we'd better pivot into the acting. I know she's getting a lot of hate, some of it feeling manufactured, but Rachel Zegler is very, very good in her role as Snow White. I would argue that in pretty much every scene she appears in, she carries that scene. I know that in a film that's perceived to be bad, there's not going to be a lot of attention given even to the good elements, but she was good. She really captured the part of Snow White well, taking what little characterization there was in the original film and adding extra layers and personality while still holding onto those core components, those Disney princess vibes. I just hope the lack of financial success for the movie doesn't kill her career. The voices for the dwarves were really good too, although the voice for Dopey was distracting because I kept thinking it sounded just like Josh Gad. The bandits were alright, nothing memorable. I can't really remember much about them other than one had a slingshot, so, clearly they made a huge impact in the movie. Same with the main love interest, really. Dude was serving up a very generic fantasy love interest portrayal. If you've seen the show Once Upon a Time, it felt like he was lifting his version right from Prince Charming in that show. Just not as good. Pretty bland, but he wasn't bad. Evil Queen? Nah, not as good if I'm being honest. In the original film, the Evil Queen came across as dark and imposing. Here she just, I don't know. She doesn't capture the essence of the character to me. I think she looked the part, but the mannerisms and the spoken dialogue just didn't hit at all. Especially in the scenes where she's giving villain monologues or acting across from Snow White or being angry. I don't like to hate too hard, but yeah, it wasn't her best outing. I don't think she's completely terrible at acting. There are some roles that she suits. She's like The Rock. Other roles are just outside of her wheelhouse and you can really tell. And this one was out of her wheelhouse. Visually, I think the film had a lot going for it. The castle design, the town, the forest, the dwarf's house, the diamond mine. It felt very well made, very beautiful and nostalgic. That was one of the big triumphs of the movie. It all looks very pleasing. I thought the costumes were vibrant and richly detailed. I enjoyed that so much of the film was brightly lit. Because my god, too much film and TV these days is dark or colourless. This was a welcome change with warm lighting and vibrant, colourful environments, sets and costumes. Just excellent. When I first saw the trailer for the movie, I thought the animals maybe looked out of place because they went for a cartoon aesthetic. It's especially noticeable on animals like the deer or the rabbits in their faces. When I watched through the movie though, the world they developed was so magical and fantastical that it felt more fitting that they looked this way as opposed to a more hyper-realistic take. So on one hand, the character CGI was really good. Then we come to the dwarfs. When I saw them in the trailer, I hated them. They looked like the worst sort of uncanny valley horror characters ever put to screen. It wasn't good. Then we came to the movie. I still had that feeling. It wasn't enough to make me hate the characters or anything because I think the voice acting was good, but they just look really weird. They clearly aren't real, but they're close enough. It's like they're the modern day variant on the type of motion capture animated characters that you'd see in the Polar Express. Also, visually, we have to talk about Snow White and her design. For the most part, everything about this film was well done. I'm talking like the hairstyles, the costumes, whatnot. Not Snow White. That wig that they gave Rachel Zegler to wear, my god, it has got to be among the worst Disney princess looks of all time. Scratch that. It's legitimately the worst Disney design choice ever. She's channeling Edna Mode and Lord Farquaad. The OG design is all well and good, but it clearly doesn't work in this instance. In so many shots, it is distractingly bad and too silly to take seriously. How are you going to have your lead character turn up looking like this? It is embarrassing. $270 million. And before we end on visuals, another cool thing I noticed was their choice to reuse older framing and shots from the animation, but brought to life in their own version. Stuff like the Queen storming down the stairs to a little dungeon, that was awesome. Then they had Snow running through the dark woods after being warned by the huntsman, and it felt straight up lifted from the original. I love these sorts of visual callbacks. They help to ground the film in nostalgia, even when they're making different creative decisions in terms of the storyline. And I think it works well. And so now we come to the story. I will run through it a little bit, even if it's one of the more iconic storylines of all time. The film begins in a storybook flashback, with the narrator, later revealed to have been Dopey the Dwarf, talking about how there was once a kingdom with a benevolent king and queen. One day there was a snowstorm and a daughter was born, who they named Snow White. All was good, the kingdom prospered until the queen died. The king then remarried a little too soon perhaps, although I do assume he was bewitched somehow. And the new queen gets rid of him and becomes a total despot, ruining the kingdom with her cruelty and greed and earning the moniker the Evil Queen. Snow White is relegated to the role of a servant, and people begin to starve. One day, she comes across a dude named Jonathan robbing the palace kitchens for food. He gets caught, and although she sticks up for him somewhat, he ends up tied to the palace gate to die of exposure in the cold. Snow lets him go, and this awakens the magic mirror to her true beautiful nature. And so when the queen returns to her mirror to perform her usual routine of asking who the fairest of them all is, she is told that it's actually Snow White. So the queen sends out the huntsman with the intention of killing Snow out in the woods where nobody will know. The dude can't bring himself to do it, so he tells her to run away. She does so, she gets lost deep in the woods, where the cute animals help her find the dwarf's cottage. She goes to sleep while the dwarves are out in their mine, and when they return, they have pity on her and let her stay for a time, with her bonding with them all, but especially with the dwarf Dopey. In this version, he's capable of speech, but he chooses not to because he doesn't want to be laughed at by his family. She meets Jonathan again, who's the leader of a group of bandits, and they battle some of the Queen's men. He gets injured, they go back to the dwarf cottage where they quickly fall in love, and Johnny Boy ends up getting snatched by the Queen's guards when he goes out to look for the late king. and we get the famous poison apple sequence. With the help of the huntsman, who's also imprisoned, they rather easily escape the prison, and he goes off to have his true love's kiss. This wakes up Snow, who in turn rallies the bandits and dwarves to come to confront the queen. Along the way, the townspeople and then even the city guards join Snow White and reject the evil queen as their, well, queen. The queen does a runner to her mirror, which informs her she still sucks, and Snow White doesn't. She smashes it, but she turns to glass and gets sucked inside the newly reformed mirror, and I assume she's dead. So that's that. I'll be real, the story was actually a lot better than I was expecting it to be, but at the same time there are still issues. The first act is really good. You get an expansion of who Snow White is. You learn about her parents, about how the evil queen ended up in charge of the kingdom. We actually have scenes and dialogue between the evil queen and Snow White to properly see their dynamic play out before our eyes. We also get a little bit more development of the romance and him just sneaking up on her while she sings and then her running away. Not much, but it is a little bit more. All of that's well and good. I enjoyed it, and I thought that the film was on a very good path to really prove the doubters wrong. It was taking the classic version and then adding a bit more pizzazz, giving us a bit more and diving deeper into the characters. She runs into the woods, and we get one of the best scenes of the film, only for it to start to get muddled from there on out. I think the major issue is that the film doesn't quite know which direction to go. They either need to go with the idea of Snow White and the bandits, or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The problem here is you split time between the two, following Snow as the POV character, which means you have less time to develop each set of characters and their connection to Snow. I think it would have been better to mostly just cut the bandits and have her stay with the dwarfs for more scenes, whilst also having Jonathan know the dwarves and meet her when he visits their house to continue building that romance. Speaking of which, they made a big song and dance about how the romance was not a focus before the movie released, and how them falling in love so quickly made no sense in the original, that the coffin kiss is creepy, the stalking, and you could remove all the prince's scenes from this one, and it wouldn't impact the narrative. But that's just clearly not true. If you exclude him entirely, then Snow White stays dead and the queen wins. Whoopsie. Also, I have to say that the ending just didn't do it for me. Even though I felt like they got a bit muddled with the bandits and the dwarves, it wasn't bad. It was just undercooked because they didn't commit to a side. But then the ending, it just didn't feel right. She gets appled, but then she's almost immediately brought back by the power of love. She's the one who then rallies everybody to go and fight for the kingdom. There's no battle or anything, and then the queen dies in a very strange manner that felt very anticlimactic. It felt like it missed the point of the story. In the OG, the queen is so powerful that Snow White has no choice but to flee. At this point, she's already won. Through the power of fear, she has kept Snow White hiding in that cottage where she'll stay forever. But in her arrogance, she needs to know that Snow's gone for good, and that she is the fairest in all the land. So she goes to poison Snow White, but she doesn't account for the dwarfs. Even though at first they were very frightened of her, they're so protective of Snow that they're willing to chase her down to try to kill her. By doing so, it's revealed that her power is ultimately a facade, that she only rules so long as people are afraid of her. She dies a very mundane death, falling off a cliff trying to escape. By having Snow come back so quickly from the dead, you cheapen the apple scene for one, which is the most iconic part of the original, but it also removes that focus of her friends fighting in her memory and losing their fear of the evil queen. Instead, she is the leader, and she is the one who confronts the queen. It doesn't have the same impact. We already had seen her stand up for what's right to the queen's face before. It was the people that needed to rise up. I think without changing earlier parts of the movie and just redoing everything, a better ending based on what we got so far would have been Jonathan arriving back at the same time as the dwarfs, only to find Snow dead. Thus, the bandits and dwarfs all chase the queen back to the city, where the populace gets to see her for what she truly is. A coward who rules through the illusion of great power and fear. Thus, the public turns and the guards turn. Not because they can hide behind Snow White, or because they have a new ruler lined up to replace the evil queen, but because the impact that Snow made on the lives of the dwarves and the bandits is so great that they are willing to risk themselves to avenge her. And by doing so, everybody else in the kingdom sees that there's nothing to fear. The queen can still do that mirror thing, I guess, if you want, or if you want to save CGI budget, just have her run to the top of the castle to try and escape, only to slip and fall to her death. Then what's-his-name goes off to wake Snow up with a kiss. I get it. On the surface, it makes her seem passive, and like the men had to step in to save the day, but I actually disagree. It's her heroism and courage that were the reason for the bandits and the dwarfs going back to fight to begin with, because she listened to them. She bonded with them. She changed their lives. Her character is not designed to be some great war leader or some revolutionary, but a benevolent and calming presence who works her own magic through kindness and gentleness. I just don't think it hits the mark in that same way. And so, that brings us to the end of my train of thought. I thought the movie was decent enough and certainly not as bad as some people are trying to frame it as. It's nowhere near the best and nowhere near the worst. It has great moments in terms of visuals and music, and some strong acting performances. It just loses its way in the narrative and never recovers after that first act. It's nowhere near the same as Pinocchio though. That remains the undisputed worst of all time, no contest. That being said, this might end up being their biggest flop so far considering how much it cost and how badly it seems to be doing at the box office. And so with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of Snow White if you've seen it? Did you like it, hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.